All right. Sorry, everyone, for the delay in getting started. We had some technical issues on the back end here, but we're all live, ready to go, and it's 6:05. So as this is the first meeting for the Administrative Policies Committee for this year, I will be starting as committee clerk, and I'll just quickly say that we do have quorum, so we're able to get underway. So I'm going to look around for a nominee or a volunteer for chair. Councillor McLaren.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Glenn for chair, please.
Okay, is there a seconder? Okay, perfect. I see Councillor Ridge. Are there any other nominations or volunteer for chair? Okay, seeing none, we'll close nominations. All those in favor for Councillor Glenn? And seeing no opposed, that carries. And Councillor Glenn, come on up.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you for the votes of support. So our next order of business is to elect a vice chair. So are there any nominations or volunteers for vice chair? Councillor Ridge? Oh, Councillor Amos.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Ridge for vice chair.
Okay, and can I have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Shaves. And are there any other nominations? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor? Okay. Councillor Ridge, you voting for yourself? Awesome. Just checking, you know. All right, and that carries. So Councillor Ridge is now vice chair. Okay, so I'm now going to call the meeting to order. So, oh, sorry, I got to read the first part here. The Administrative Policy Committee will host a public meeting at 6 p.m. on Thursday, February 23rd, 2023, to consider tax write-offs pursuant to sections 357 and 358 of the Municipal Act of 2001. Okay, and so, are we good?
Madam Chair, we do not have any members of the public with us this evening, so we can close the public meeting and continue forward.
Okay, thank you. So I'll call the meeting to order. All right. Okay, so we have an addendum. So are there any other, I'm going to acknowledge the addendum, and are there any further changes? Okay. Can I get someone to move to add the addendum? Councillor Shaves, seconded by Councillor McLaren. All in favor? Thank you. That's passed. Okay. All right. So we need to confirm the minutes. Okay. So can I get someone to move that? Okay, Councillor McLaren, and a seconder. Councillor Amos, and all in favor? Okay. Does anyone have a disclosure of pecuniary interest to declare? Okay, seeing none. Do we have any delegations tonight? Okay, no delegations. All right, briefings are coming there. Okay, so we're moving to business. So, okay. Okay, so we now have to call to order the Rideaucrest Board of Management. So be it resolved that the Administrative Policy Committees resolve itself into the Board of Management for Rideaucrest Home. So can I have someone move that, please? Councillor McLaren, seconded by Councillor Shaves, and all in favor? Okay, so we've approved that. And so,
Yeah, Ms. Keys is ready to go.
and Ms. Keys, you're ready to go. The floor is yours.
A briefing for you, a very high-level overview of long-term care in Ontario, of Rideaucrest specifically, and a bit about your role as board members. So it's great to finally be here and be able to see some new faces on our board, and of course some returning faces as well. My name is Casey Keys. I am the administrator at Rideaucrest Home. I have been with the home for 9 years now. My background is nursing. I've been a nurse for about 20 years. Much of that career has been in long-term care sector, so both with for-profit and municipal homes. So this brief overview, there's also information that I have provided to you on the council SharePoint, which does go over some complexities of long-term care, much of which I'll talk about in the report tonight, as well as this briefing. So what is long-term care in Ontario? In Ontario, long-term care homes are regulated and funded by the provincial government. Government agencies determine who is eligible to be admitted to, did that change for me up there? Okay, perfect, sorry. Technically a bit challenged up here. Just go back to, sorry. Government agencies determine who is eligible to be admitted to long-term care and manage the wait lists for those homes. Each home is granted a license to operate by the provincial government. Homes are required to follow all requirements set out in the Fixing Long-Term Care Homes Act, which is one of the most stringent pieces of nursing home legislation and is one of the most heavily regulated industries in our country. There are 626 long-term care homes in Ontario with approximately 78,000 long-stay beds, which are allocated to provide care, accommodation, and services to residents who require permanent placement. There are a variety of ownership and governance models within the sector, which are not-for-profit, municipal, and for-profit homes. 58% of homes are privately owned, 24% are not-for-profit, and 16% are municipal. The average time for placement in long-term care in Ontario is 152 days. The wait list for long-stay beds is close to 40,000 individuals right now, and if Rideaucrest Home specifically, there's 500, just over 500 individuals on our wait list within our community. What does long-term care do? To understand operational and financial challenges in long-term care, it's important to understand the reality of long-term care operations in 2023. Over the past decade and slightly beyond, the resident population in long-term care homes has become much more clinically complex and fragile. The prevalence of cognitive impairment and dementia has increased, as well as the complex diagnoses and combination of diagnoses has made providing care more difficult in our sector. There has been an important societal shift over the last decade within the sector, which has changed the way we think about dementia and dementia care and what we expect from long-term care homes. As well, the mental health and housing crisis in communities across the province has greatly impacted who we are seeing entering our long-term care homes. The unique care needs these individuals require, along with the training and education required by staff so that they can provide optimal care to all individuals, has become a challenge for our homes. Ontario's long-term care homes have embraced this shift and are moving away from the medical model of care with fixed activities and schedules to a more flexible and personalized resident-focused approach to care. Who lives in long-term care? 15 years ago, I would have told you that long-term care homes, or homes for the aged as they were once known, cared primarily for seniors within our communities. This is no longer the case. Gone are the days of residents arriving to long-term care homes on their own or with little assistance, requiring minimal care and services. We are seeing very complex cases, with many of our residents arriving via wheelchair or stretcher, having multiple chronic and acute diagnoses, requiring extensive or total assistance for care, and requiring the administration of 10 or more medications on a daily basis. I have provided you with some statistics on the board, which shows a whole range of diagnoses within long-term care. Some of the more staggering ones that we've seen increase over the last decade is 90% of our admissions and residents living in long-term care have some form of cognitive impairment. As well, we're seeing that 40% need monitoring for acute medical conditions, which has definitely increased over the years. How is long-term care governed? All long-term care homes are funded and regulated by the provincial government and are overseen by the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. Homes are required to follow the Fixing Long-Term Care Act of 2021, to which there are over 200 sections, as well as the regulations associated to the Act, which there are over 400 sections. The inspection branch of the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care provides oversight and on-site inspections to home to ensure compliance in all of these areas. Homes are also required to meet all aspects of the Residents' Bill of Rights, to which there are 29 rights to be met. There has been a great deal of change to all of these pieces of legislation as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Fixing Long-Term Care Act was released in 2021, which replaced the Long-Term Care Homes Act of 2007. The government is slowly implementing these new changes and is also continuing to build and release the associated changes to the regulations. Some key changes to the Act that we've seen are an enhancement to emergency planning, defining the caregiver role for long-term care homes and ensuring a visitor policy is in place, updating palliative care requirements, expanding infection prevention and control roles, the provision for 4 hours of direct resident care per resident per day, as well as, of course, updating the Resident Bill of Rights, which we spoke about. How is long-term care funded? Long-term care funding is extremely complex, as there are many standard funding streams that can be used for specific purpose, but there are also numerous funding streams that can be used for a variety of purpose or may only be available for a certain time period or even one time only. At any given time, there are upwards of 40 funding pots or streams to our sector. A majority of our funding is provided through 4 main funding envelopes: nursing and personal care, programs and support services, nutritional support, and other accommodation, as well as through a daily subsidy called the level of care per diem. All of these funding streams differ between homes dependent upon size, bed capacity, and services provided. Long-term care homes also receive payments directly through residents for room and board. Residents pay accommodation rates or co-payments that are set by the government based on the type of accommodation that they receive, whether that be basic, semi-private, or private. Current monthly rates paid by residents range from $1,938 to $2,769. The basic accommodation portion of resident payment is remitted back to the province, and the remaining amount is kept by homes for their operations. Homes are mandated to ensure that they have a minimum of 40% basic accommodation available within their homes. All funding provided to homes by the province and our residents must be rigorously accounted for and again can only be used for specific purpose. Any unspent funds related to care are returned to the government. Any unspent funds in the other accommodation envelope can be retained by the home. And who is Rideaucrest Home? Rideaucrest has a long, rich history in Kingston. The original stone building was built in 1935 on Montreal Street, which is the current site of the Housing and Social Services Department. Our new home, our current home, opened in 1993, which overlooks Kingston's Inner Harbor and offers climate-controlled single-resident rooms with gathering and activity spaces aimed at enriching the lives of our 170 residents that live with us. Resident rooms are all semi-private and private by design throughout our 4 terraces. Each terrace has 42 beds, aside from Garden Walk, which is our first floor, our secure unit, which has 44 beds. Of the 170 beds that we have, 10 of those rooms are private, with separate living and bathroom accommodations. Our home has over 200 employees that work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to provide client-centered customer service to our resident population. Rideaucrest has a number of internal departments and services. The nursing department, which is comprised of personal support workers, registered practical nurses, and registered nurses. This team is overseen by our director of care and 3 assistant directors of care. We have our dietary services, which is comprised of our dietary aides and cooks. This team provides and serves all of our meals to our residents and is overseen by the food service supervisor and our full-time in-house dietitian. Environmental services is our housekeeping and laundry team. We have our life enrichment department, which oversees all of resident programming, spiritual care services, and our volunteers. And lastly, our business office, which administers all of the home staffing needs, payroll, invoicing, and funding, and that is led by our administration manager. Our team is also comprised of a nurse practitioner, a medical director, an attending physician, physiotherapy team, a quality lead, and many community support services to which we have contracts with. Our team also works very closely with many city departments to ensure efficient operations, particularly with the Facilities Maintenance and Construction Services Group to ensure that our home is in good state and repair. Our home works with a number of community partners to ensure we are meeting the needs of our residents. Rideaucrest is an accredited home through Accreditation Canada. Our latest accreditation survey was completed in 2021, and we are set for our next survey in 2025. Rideaucrest is also a member with 2 long-term care advocacy groups, the Ontario Long-Term Care Association and Advantage Ontario. Both of these groups provide a tremendous amount of advocacy support for our sector, as well as provide homes with updates and guidance within the sector. These groups have both been instrumental in guiding us through the COVID-19 pandemic. Rideaucrest also has a long-standing relationship with Extendicare Canada, which has evolved and changed over the time to meet the needs of our home. Our current contract with Extendicare provides the home with all policies and procedures related to operations, as well as access to consulting services as needed and access to a group purchasing benefit. The licensee for Rideaucrest Home is the City of Kingston, and city staff fulfill that obligation. We are part of the Community Services team and report to Commissioner Paige Agnew. The home also reports to the Board of Management every 2 months with an information report via the Administrative Policies Committee outlining pertinent operational and financial topics. The current mandate for municipal delivery of long-term care services is set out in the Fixing Long-Term Care Act. This specifies that every upper or single-tier southern municipality is required to maintain at least 1 municipal home individually or jointly. The Board of Management must be comprised of no fewer than 3 members of council. It is important to know that there are specific requirements within the Act for board members related to a police record check having to be completed within 6 months of becoming a member, as well as a signed declaration related to offences, which must be signed within 1 month of becoming a member. These are new requirements within the new Fixing Long-Term Care Act. There are also administrative policies and fines that can be given to board members. However, these are held for egregious circumstances and are capped at a certain amount for municipal members. The 2022 municipally approved Rideaucrest budget was funded 66% through provincial subsidies. 2% of that was through accommodation revenue paid by residents, and we are very fortunate to have an incremental 31% of municipal funding that allows us to provide amenities for our residents. As you can see in the slide, our total budget for Rideaucrest Home is just over $20 million annually, and just over $6 million of that is the municipal contribution. Current priorities for Rideaucrest are as follows. First and foremost, pandemic response and recovery. We have seen a tremendous devastation within our sector over the course of the last 3 years, and as a result, we have also seen great change. Ensuring adequate and accurate communication with our residents, families, and staff has been imperative throughout the pandemic and is a priority for our home moving forward. We have seen an increase in difficult family dynamics and a lack of trust towards the sector, operations within homes, and the staff. This has been extremely challenging for many, and we continue to navigate these difficulties. The pandemic has caused a health and human resource crisis across the province, and here in Kingston, we are no exception. We continue to work with the city's human resource team on retention and recruitment strategies to ensure our ability to comply with the Act and provide high-quality services to our residents. The pandemic has also made it very difficult for homes from a financial perspective. As the province reacted to the pandemic with funding uncertainties...
Ms. Keys, just 1 more minute.
Yeah.
Just 1 more minute.
Last slide. It was very challenging for homes to be able to plan from a financial perspective. But as we emerged from the pandemic, we are working with the province to look to establish and normalize funding. As mentioned, as a result of the pandemic, there have been many legislative changes to our long-term care sector, and we need to ensure that we understand and adapt our policies and procedures and practices to align with these many changes. We also continue to have a number of renovation upgrades currently being undertaken within our home, which is adapting to infection control practices and policies. And then lastly, as part of the Fixing Long-Term Care Act, we are looking to implement the 4 hours of resident care per resident per day by March of 2025, and this is a phased approach, which we did begin in 2022, and we'll be looking to add again this year. And that's all I have for you this evening. I would just like to thank you for this quick overview, and I understand that there's a lot of information and a lot that can happen with long-term care, and I'm happy to provide a tour to anybody if they wish to come to the home, to see the home and see the operations. Happy to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Keys. I'm going to now open this up to committee members to ask questions. So does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask about the presentation? Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Couple of questions in regards to, you had said that right now Kingston has a 500 wait list. My question is, when a bed opens up, are we drawing from all across the province, or are we actually drawing from Kingston residents who need spots here in Kingston?
We have seen, right now, we continue to draw just from Kingston. There is a mandate where, that has just come out most recently, that residents can be admitted to whatever home is available and bed is available to them. That has not been implemented a lot over the course of, like, throughout the province, and in Kingston, we have not seen that happen at all. We have still been admitting Kingston residents to our Kingston homes.
Okay. Not that I'm against having someone from another area of the province come, but when you have support networks that are critical to individuals' care, generally they live in the area, and I'm an advocate of having a local come into our homes, just because generally the care is there.
Absolutely.
I noticed that the Director of Care is underspent in the report that you offer. Can you tell me what is the complement for full-time and part-time staffing in that area, when fully
staffed?
When fully staffed.
That's right. So when fully staffed, we have 42 full-time PSWs and 44 part-time PSWs. We have 24 full-time RPNs and the same complement of part-time. And fully staffed, I believe it's 12 RNs and then part-time to backfill them as well. Now we are, as part of the 4 hours of care mandate, we did add additional 16 staff in 2022. We are set this coming April, when the funding increases again, to add an additional 20 more staff to that direct care pool. Of course, recruitment is a challenge at this time,
So that was my next question. So if that is the ideal blue sky, where are you actually at?
So we do have, within that group alone, the nursing group, we do have some part-time vacancies in those pools. In the PSW group, I believe there was 4 as of yesterday when we reviewed that. There's 7 within the RPN group, and our RN group is very small, and there's 4 currently. Full-time vacancies, there is none. Those are all filled.
Is there concern for level of care with the amount of vacancies that you have in that department?
At this time, we do not have a concern in terms of quality of care that we can provide to our residents due to recruitment challenges. We are seeing recruitment challenges and working alongside our HR team to ensure that we are reaching out to our educational institutions that are local here to get students in place for placement opportunities. We're working on our recruitment bonuses. We're now paying for College of Nurses registrations. We're looking to increase our start wage, and those have been very successful for us to date. We haven't seen ourselves having to go to agency staffing, which unfortunately many of our neighboring partners in this community have had to do that. We haven't come below our staffing levels enough to have to do that to date. We also, when we create our budget for staffing, we staff based on being fully staffed at all times. We know we have to account for sick time and vacation and that sort of thing. So, we are prepared from a staffing perspective and have not seen that quality of care decrease. We as well have no non-compliance with the province at this time. The ministry inspectors have been through the home and have not seen an issue with our staffing levels to date, so we're quite satisfied with that.
Perfect. Okay. One last question. You had indicated in the report that typically, or it's 170 rooms that you have available, but I noticed that you have 2 rooms that have been offline for a while. Renovations, I'm assuming. Is there an anticipated time when they will come back online and residents, or you have 2 beds or 4 beds that would open up?
Yeah. So as mentioned, we do have a number of renovation projects underway at the home. One of those is the resident washrooms. So the way in which our home is laid out, each resident has their own bedroom, and 2 residents share 1 washroom. So essentially a Jack and Jill bathroom. Right now, as we are renovating those washrooms, we have to displace those 2 residents. So we have requested from the province to hold 2 beds in abeyance for the duration of the renovation project. So we relocate those 2 residents, renovate their washroom, place them back, and then move to the next 2 rooms. So at this point, we're working on our 4th floor. We anticipate to have that floor completed by May. We will then need to do the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st floor. So we are looking at over a year to 2 years' time to have these beds held in abeyance for.
My time ran out, apparently. This is a bit of a journey then for the home. I'm assuming then lots of support is given to as the transition is happening for the 2 individuals that are being displaced.
Yes. Yeah, we like to give them, everybody is aware that renovations are taking place.
Okay.
The individuals that are displaced, we give them more than a week's notice to let them know that they will be moving to another room. And then, of course, we move all of that equipment ourselves, along with our contracted service right now, to ensure that there's no issue and everybody's set up in their new rooms.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anyone else from the committee have questions? Okay, so seeing none, do any members have questions specific to the report? Just the presentation? Okay, seeing none, are there any members of the public that wish to speak? You have up to 5 minutes. Okay, nope, no members of the public in the meeting. Okay, so with that, thank you very much, Ms. Keys. I really appreciate the presentation and the answering of the questions. So with that, I need someone to move for the Administrative Policies Committee to rise from the Board of Management for Rideaucrest Home, moved by Councillor Shaves, seconded by Councillor McLaren, and all in favor? Okay, and that's passed. All right, so we're now on to our next item of business, tax write-offs pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001 for February 2023. So the report of the Chief Financial Officer and City Treasurer is attached. So if the staff would like to introduce the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I will do that. So you have the tax write-off report in front of you tonight. This is a report that comes to the committee 3 or 4 times a year, and basically recommends a write-off for properties for a variety of reasons that are listed in the report. Certainly things with respect to where properties are not in use for things like repairs and renovations, if there's been buildings that have been destroyed or damaged. There is an exhibit to the report that lists each of the properties and also splits out the components, whether it's municipal, the education component, as well as if there's a downtown business levy included. The amounts that are recommended are included in a budget provision, and so these amounts have been provided for in this case in the draft 2023 budget, and so they'll be charged against that. So there'll be no further financial impact on that.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Amos?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. I noticed, and this is just me being the newbie, so forgive me. One of the buildings was obviously paying a large amount of taxes and has now become exempt, and that would be 92 Grant Timmins Drive. Can you, I didn't understand, so when a property becomes exempt, what does that mean, other than the obvious, it becomes exempt?
Thank you for the question. So this property was becoming exempt because it was purchased by Queen's, educational institution that is exempt from taxation.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Any other questions? Okay. Okay. Okay, so we have a recommendation that the Administrative Policies Committee recommend to Council that Council approve the cancellation, reduction, or refund of taxes pursuant to applications made under Sections 357 and 358 of the Municipal Act 2001, totaling $71,469.74, of which $57,068.69 is the city's portion, and the amount charged back to the school boards and downtown Kingston business improvement area are $14,019.25 and $381.80 respectively, as listed in Exhibit A attached to report number AP 23003. Could I have someone move this, please? Councillor McLaren, and a seconder, Councillor Ridge. Okay. Any comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that's passed. Okay, so on to our next item of business. 2023 tax ratios, tax capping parameters, and other property tax policy. So we have a recommendation before committee. So I would like staff to introduce the report first. So over to you, Ms. Kim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we took the opportunity of this report to, it's a little bit of a recommendation report and maybe a whole lot of information report as well. So we thought it was a good opportunity to sort of provide a bigger picture to the committee and some of the history and context. So with respect to the recommendation, we are looking for approval for our tax ratios for the 2023 taxation year. It is a requirement that council pass a bylaw with respect to the use of property class tax ratios. And those tax ratios basically help us to distribute the burden of taxation across the various property taxes. So that's part of the final tax rate calculation. Quite often ratios are used in response to reassessment shifts. When the province does a reassessment, and because we are still waiting for a reassessment from the province and still using the values from 2016 to 2020, because there's no shifts, the ratios that we are recommending are the same ratios that we used last year for the 2022 rates. We did provide in the report a little bit of history with respect to when the tax ratios have changed in the past. Particularly for the multi-residential class, and there's some history in there around council recommendation to change the ratios back as far as 2008, as well as some of what the province did with respect to multi-residential tax ratios across the province at the last reassessment in 2016, where we saw multi-residential assessment values go sky high, and the province stepped in to look at how to address some of that. So that history and context is in there. The other class that we talk about is the farm property tax class. Again, a class that went up significantly in the last reassessment. And so there was some work done by council, recommendation from council that we reduced that ratio as well back as part of that reassessment in 2016. The other piece that's in the report is property tax capping. And this is the first year that we don't have a recommendation. So for those of you new to the committee, you picked your timing really well. So this will be the first year we don't have tax capping. So the tax capping program, per the Municipal Act over the years, has been a program that limited tax increases to the commercial and industrial properties, commercial, industrial, and multi-residential properties, as they were moving towards current value assessment. So it was a way to limit those increases and that burden for those property classes. There have been various options that council has utilized over the years to move those properties to the current value assessment. So where it was limited, where there were limitations of how close to the current value assessment they could get, where there were options to move them closer, council over the years has chosen to maximize those options. So where there was an option, staff were directed to use it to get as close as we could to the current value assessment. And so as of 2023, we now have all of those properties at current value assessment, and there's no need for any more capping. So we did provide some of that information in the report, just so you knew where it was coming from, but you'll see there's no recommendation. And then finally, we took the opportunity just to do a little bit of information on other property tax policy. So this is a more to come section, but just to give you a little bit of idea of some of the things that we're currently working on and information that will be coming back to the committee and to council on those.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. And so over to the committee. Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. It's not that I don't like silence, for the record. Looking at the tax ratios that you're recommending and knowing that the tax, that there's been no tax, no assessments of land values for since 2016, should there be some adjustments to allow for going, for the new tax or the land tax assessments going forward, or are you capturing that? Is this a generic one, or should we be adjusting?
Thank you for that question through you, Madam Chair. So nothing included in these ratios at this point. This is a status quo in terms of the ratios. Once the reassessment is done by the province, then we will be doing some analysis on the impacts of that to the various property classes and be bringing some recommendations back then for that next set of tax ratios. And there may be some desire at that point for the committee to look at making some changes at that point. We have been asking on a regular basis of the province when this is going to happen in terms of the assessment. And I think part of the problem is because they put it on hold as a result of the pandemic. And then, of course, the market changes that happened after that. My personal opinion is they're in a little bit of a position now where they're probably wishing they had done something earlier. And now it's kind of when do we do something and how are we going to fix some of the challenges. So we know certainly across the province, residential values very high. I would expect our commercial industrial not as high. And so that could result in a shift of our taxes over to our residential taxpayers who are between residential and multi-res is about 75% of our taxes. And so there's been a lot of discussion with the province around when do we do it? Is it a 4-year? Do we catch right up? Do we do something as of a couple of years ago? Do we phase in longer than the 4-year phase in? So there's been a lot of that discussion. As late as last Friday at my treasurer's meeting, we had a representative from the Ministry of Finance there, and we asked the question, what's the update, what's going on? And there was absolutely nothing that they could provide us at that time. So there's just no information out there. So I expect this is part of the problem, is trying to figure out how the impact of what that reassessment might look like. But certainly ratios is one tool that council will have to address. I expect the province will probably be looking at what the impacts are and what they can do from a provincial level, but certainly then there'll be the ratios, and council may have some ability to move ratios around within certain limits in terms of what we can do with those ratios.
And that's my concern, is that the taxpayer is going to get walloped when the dust finally settles. So I was just wondering if we can soften that blow a little bit somehow, some way. So
Yes,
yeah.
yes, thank you. And perhaps maybe I could ask Mr. Walker just to do a brief explanation of what we can do with the ratios. There is the opportunity to move the ratios so that there is no shift. I don't know, Jeff, maybe you could just give us a highlight on how that works.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, after there's a reassessment, you can look at making it close to revenue neutral. It's at a broad class level, so the residential class would include other classes like the farm and new multi-residential properties, the ones that are based on that residential rate. Then other class would be commercial and industrial, and you can make it so that at the broad class level at least, they pick up the same percentages of assessment going forward as they are in the current assessment. So if residential was to get a much higher increase than other classes, then we could look at doing a revenue neutral class ratio to keep everybody relatively where they are. It's not a pick and choose is the thing with it, though. You can't say we'll lower one ratio while we increase another, but keep this one the same. It's if you're in to do the revenue neutral, it is completely across the board. We also would have the opportunity to adjust other ratios as we have done in the past. If it wasn't the residential rates perhaps that were, but the multi-residential rates, if they were the ones that got hit the highest, we could look at lowering that particular class, and then the other classes would pick up the amount of the cost of that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Ridge.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. I just have a question about the ratio for the new multi-residential units as opposed to the multi-residential units. I see there's the multi-residential are at 1.7, whereas the new multi-residential are at 1. Can there just be a bit of more clarification around why there's why there are two different types of units and or property classes, and why there is such a discrepancy between the tax ratio percentages? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. The new multi-residential tax ratio is a class that is, at this point, a mandatory class. The province has made it mandatory that municipalities have the new multi-residential class. It is to be at a tax ratio of 1 to 1.1. Kingston actually brought the class in 2002 in order to try to spur development of multi-residential properties. That's sort of the purpose of the class being at the lower ratio, is to incent developers to do that class. It's not saying that the rents have to be at a certain level between the new multi-residential property compared to another multi-residential. It's just if it's built after the date that you bring it in as a class, then it's at that tax ratio. And for Kingston, that tax ratio was 1. The multi-residential tax ratio we have been lowering over the years as provided in the report. We went from about 2.6 something down to where we thought we were going to land at 2.1 and sort of keep it there. Reason being differences in the way that a multi-residential property is assessed compared to a residential property. Multi-residential are based on an income approach, residential are based on current value assessment. It can create some pretty big differences based on which type of assessment it is, whether it's a condominium that's based on market value or a multi-residential property based on the income approach. The per unit taxes that are derived out of the two can be quite different, and that's where we thought the ratio of around 2 was pretty good. When the last reassessment happened and there were large increases in the multi-res assessments, the province brought in saying you cannot be higher than 2 as the ratio, and if you are, you cannot pass along any budgetary increases to that class. We immediately brought it down in 2017 to that level of 2, and then to continue to stop above guideline rent increases, the ability to have those based on the taxes. We continued to lower it down each year to take away the assessment related part of the increase so that they just received a budgetary increase like other properties. And that's where we got to the 1.7 by the end of 2020. At this point, we've kept it there. The province, as Des had mentioned, is looking at further policy towards the multi-residential tax ratio. And what we will be doing in the next reassessment would depend on how that class compares to other property classes in the reassessment. But for right now, we're sitting at that rate and have just maintained that rate.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation. It's greatly appreciated. You said a lot there about the multi-residential property class, and so just for clarification's purposes, the new multi-residential property class is provincially regulated or legislated, right? So we don't have any choice but to include that property class and all properties, multi-residentials that were built after a certain time under that class. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you very much. And so it is then reasonable to expect that as we develop, or as more properties, multi-residential properties are developed, they will fall within that property class, and so that ratio in terms of class burden percentage will change over time as depreciation of properties occur from multi-residential property class. So the percentage will shift. Okay, so the other question that I had is around the multi-residential property class. There's been a thank you again for your explanation on that. I see that there's the range of fairness in the tax ratio as it currently exists. Are there any expectations that there will be further adjustments to this tax ratio in the future based on potential provincial action?
Through you, Madam Chair, are you referring to the multi-residential tax ratio or tax ratios in general?
Specifically that property class in this case.
Through you, Madam Chair, for the multi-residential tax ratio at current, once we lower it down, like when we lowered it from 1.8 to 1.7, we are at 1.7. That is our new level. We cannot go back up to 1.8 unless it was part of a revenue neutral shift during a reassessment. We could lower it down further because the range of fairness is at the the 1 to 1.1, like the new multi-residential, but we cannot raise it back up. You can only move towards the ranges of fairness.
Okay, that was what I was looking for. Thank you very much.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none. No one's here from the public. All right, so I need somebody to move our motion that the Administrative Policies Committee recommend to Council that Council approve the 2023 tax ratios as follows. A, the residential property class to be set at 1, the new multi-residential property class to be set at 1, the multi-residential property class to be set at 1.7, the commercial property class to be set at 1.98, the industrial property class to be set at 2.63, the pipeline property class to be set at 1.1728, the farm property class to be set at 0.2, and the managed forest property class to be set at 0.25, and that the bylaw attached as Exhibit A to Report AP 23004 be presented to Council in order to establish the 2023 tax ratios. And so can I have someone move that? Councillor McLaren, seconded by Councillor Ridge. And any comments, questions, debate? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? And that's passed. Thank you. All right, so we have no other motions or other business. Any other correspondence? Nothing? Nope. Okay, so the date of the next meeting of the Administrative Policies Committee is April 6, 2023 at 6 p.m. So I need someone to move to adjourn. Councillor McLaren, Councillor Ridge, and all in favor? Thank you, everyone. That was quick and easy and painless.